The first person I thought of for this topic is our next guest, and it's Paul Matties. And Paul Matties has been on the scene in the contest arena, and, of course, Saratoga. The family is synonymous with the high level of play in the game of thoroughbred horse racing. It's a pleasure to go back to Boston Spa this evening and bring Paul Matties to Night School. Paul, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. When you asked me to do a show on expert betting, I had to say yes because if you'd spent one day in my office in the last 2 months, you were certain to hear I'm the worst bettor in the world. So who a better expert than the worst bettor in the world? But thank you for having me.
Well, and this, I thought it was a terrific topic for you because it's a nuanced discussion in terms of what constitutes a big bankroll. And, Roger Satina just joined us, and we, Roger, of course, from the contest scene. And I'll start the same way with you that I did with him. I mean, in terms of growing a bankroll and spending a larger sum of money as your acumen grew and as your affluence and frankly, as you could afford to play with a bigger bankroll, what did that constitute for you? And when and how did you start to feel confident to risk bigger amounts of money against your opinion?
Well, more seriousseriously, it's something that I think about all the time because, right now I'm in a transition period of betting. So it's, with source market fees and that sort of thing, the rebate levels have been shrinking somewhat. So, this idea of betting, you had Andy Beyer on your regular show last week, and it just got me thinking that the tools of handicapping aren't any different. You're listening, his book is 40 years old. The racing form looks almost identical to the racing times. The tools aren't the same. If Andy had been in jail for 25 years, the last 25 years, and he came out, the handicapping wouldn't be that much different to him. But the thing that is different is the betting, because the quality of the handicappers are better, and the opportunities of betting with all these pools and these mega pools and the chances to make big money is completely different in the last 25 or 30 years. So, finding that balance has been the key, going forward for anybody who's been playing in the last 25 years. When I first started playing, I came up with like 3 rules that I came up with that I still try to use today. And the first one is to bet a little to win a lot, and it's basically just go for scores when you can, and when you're right, get paid. That's the first rule, and the second rule is just as important. It's make sure that after a result, think about a race before it comes, what the result's going to be beforehand, and make sure that a result afterwards will not make you unhappy. Think about if this race runs 3-2, am I going to be upset if I have a $1 exacta? Am I going to be upset if I don't have it at all? That type of thinking is something that most, even regular players, don't go through, and I think that's extremely important. It gets your mindset of your strategy of how you want to bet. And then the third rule I had was more of a bet size type thing, where make sure that you're betting more money on the horses that you have a higher opinion. That seems simple, but it's amazing to watch somebody, their best bet win. I spent many days at races where somebody would make their best bet would win, and they would go home and they'd be a loser. That's something you cannot do if you're going to take the races seriously. I try to keep those 3 rules in mind even today. 30 years later, I still try to keep those things in rule. Those rules. Now, the thing that makes it difficult is that when you become a big in betting more, and almost everybody nowadays, if you're a regular player, you're getting a rebate. And the first law of rebates is churn. So that makes it much more difficult, especially those first two rules, because you have to start handling more money. And that's where the balance comes in. It's how much more should I bet, and how am I still taking enough chance to win a lot of money? Which like in the old days, if you're, I could bet $100 exacta straight and not be mad if it came in the other way, and I would think that would be a good bet. Nowadays, I don't really want to do that because I can maybe tie up a race and get the rebate, get the money, take a small profit for the race. So it's that delicate balance is something that you have to find. I think at any level. I don't think it's even if you're betting a lot of money or a little money. I just think that's those are the rules that I kind of try to live by.
You bring up an area as well in that conversation, Paul, that we have not really touched on that much in our topics, and that is not so much the satisfaction level, but having a feel for the returns. And one thing I'm just thinking over the last several years, we have never talked about watching the will pays. Specifically, let's talk about the exacta will pays and the double will pays, and utilizing that kind of board watching to leverage your opinion. I know when I talked to Lonnie Goldfeder of the DRF, he is very adept at keeping an eye on the will pays and then adjusting. And of course, one of the challenges you talk about, source market fees and some of the expenses that make it difficult for people to beat the game these days. And, there's another area that makes it hard, and that is those computerized programs that are probing the will pays and then batch betting automatically, just based on incongruities in the marketplace. Talk a little bit about that and how a big player uses it to their advantage and presses when they see overlays in those kinds of pools.
Well, I mean, that to me is the big challenge of modern day gambling is how you deal with the late moves of the board. You have to have an idea of what things are going to pay, and I don't think you can be a winning player without it. I mean, that would be the first thing, along those lines. And second of all, knowing that and just accepting that these prices are going to change on all the major contenders, because with the computer syndicates, whatever you want to call them, they are going to take all these horses that they seem to think have a chance, is going to increase their value by throwing other horses out. So, they're going to throw out most of the long shots. So what's happened in the last 25 years is that there are way more. When I first started playing, it was almost, a sucker play to play a 25 to 1 shot or, a 30 to 1 shot. But nowadays, there are, extreme value in 30 to 1 shots, 50 to 1 shots. And when I hear people talk about how tough it is to beat the game, I think that's their problem, because these computer guys have taken away their edge by thinking, one guy might say, well, that horse was, 6 to 5, and he should have been 4 to 5. And that's enough. If you're that good, you can be a winner with that kind of mentality. But these computer guys are taking that edge away from you. And the guys who would bet 4-horse exacta boxes and throw out 2 horses that seemingly had no chance, those guys they're a dying breed with these computers because they can do it better. But what the computers can't do better, and I insist in this, and I got in trouble, saying this one other time, but I still believe it, is that humans can handicap better than those computer systems, and they certainly can spot long shots better, than the computers. And going forward, you have to try to have those blissed out horses in there at some point. that's just the way of the world, the way of horse racing has evolved.
Jeremy.
I like what Paul was talking about and Steve was talking about of looking at the will pays and the pools and trying to leverage what you're doing. I think what you'll see a lot of times early in a race card, now with the advent of the pick six carryovers and the jackpot pools, more so than ever, it was always they put the worst races on the card in the smallest fields at the front of a racing card. Because there's less handle on earlier races than later races as the crowd trickles in and the simulcast audience develops throughout the day. So the early card is usually your short fields to start with. But with the pick six getting popular in some different areas, the early races are almost unplayable in some situations if you don't look to the doubles or the pick threes. A lot of times the most standout 3 to 5 favorite in the card is going to be in the second race. It just seems that's where they end up getting carded. If you can look ahead to those daily double probables and leverage that against your pick in the first race, figure you're not going to bet the second race. You're not going to play a maiden claimer at 3 to 5 in a standout situation. But if you could turn your 4 to 1 horse in the first race into an $18 double by taking that free space in the next race, you've now made a 4 to 1 shot into an 8 to 1 shot in a sense. So I think it's important for people to look ahead with those will pays as much as anything, because if you know where the big favorites are in the card, you don't want to step into that landmine. If it's a big horse in the feature race and the feature's the 8th on the card and it's Don't Tell Sophia at 2 to 5 in a stakes race at Keeneland and you don't think she can get beat, you have to start thinking in races 7 or even 6, 7, and 8 of how you're going to get to that horse and make any value.
Well, along those lines, I think that's the huge advantage that's different from 25 years. That's a positive change from the last 25 years. When that race came up, when I was a kid, that was like the race where you went and got fried dough. You thought a 3 to 5 shot was going to win, you just skipped it. You couldn't do anything with it. And even though you might be right, you had an opinion that the horse couldn't lose. You almost couldn't want to do anything with it, especially on a smaller type bankroll. But nowadays, those races are advantage. If you have an opinion, even as it could be even as low as even money. I had an opinion tonight here at Mountaineer that I liked a horse that was 6 to 5 in a pick 5, and I thought it was a value play. I thought the chances of winning were less, and I was going to single them in some of the horizontal bets. And I think that's the right move, and that's somewhat of a modern advantage, which is different. And back to your other comment about the early races. This is more on the topic of what you guys were aiming at. I think on the bigger bankrolls, the most advantage pool that I found, and this is something that I've just learned. It's something I didn't know immediately, but I am certain of it, is the pick 5. I think the pick 5 has become a pool that is a huge edge for a bigger bankroll. I think it's over the limit of what most people can spread and cover. I think it's also when people have to try to start singling 2 horses in sequences, or not tying up races, not being able to tie up races with 4 horses or 5 horses. I think that becomes a real problem to the smaller bankroll, and I've seen it more and more that that is the biggest advantage. And the other thing about the pick 5 pool is that as long as it's big enough, you can bet a lot of money and get the rebates aren't a big deal in them, but you can with a rebate in a pick 5, it's basically a no takeout type race. Bet it's ideal for somebody who wants to bet more money. And if you were looking to make the leap, and even if you were on a smaller bankroll, the idea of putting all your money into taking $800 a day and playing it in the pick 5, I think might be a winning play in the long run if that's the way you want to go, just based on bankroll alone. Where I don't think the pick 4 has got any advantage for a bigger bankroll at all, and especially with the 50-cent denominations. Since they've gone to those, I don't think the pick 4 holds any advantage for anybody betting anymore. It's an okay bet. I'm not discouraging it, but there's no advantage by anybody who's betting more in a pick four. The only thing that you may be able to do in a pick four that somebody else is take more alls in situations where I have two tie-up races and they're alls. So maybe you have an advantage there against somebody else, but it's very limited.
Paul, expand on that premise, because this is an area that people that are learning. First of all, the question is begged. How do you learn this element? Because it isn't laid out really for anybody in books. I mean, this is, we can learn, we talked about Andy's picking winners. It's 40th anniversary. We all had our areas that taught us the basics of handicapping, but bankroll management and understanding the financial market aspect of the game has been woefully underaddressed. I mean, Barry Meadow, Money Secrets at the Racetrack, that's probably, one spot. And there has been some material, but they aren't as mainstream or as approachable as Andy's book or Steve Christ's Exotic Betting. Where does a player get this acumen?
Well, I think it's new. I mean, that was back to my point that it's changed. I mean, it's still an evolving, circumstance. And some of the things that I do is that, back to asking yourself questions. I think it's important in the horizontal bets too. The first place I go to is, am I tying up the race in my mind? Can I get this race down to two horses? I don't care if they're both 3 to 5. Am I tying this leg up by taking both horses? Can I tie the race up with 4 horses? That's where I start. And then if I can't, I start looking at it. How speculative am I in the race? And then my next question would be in the sequence, and especially in the speculative races. My question would be: do I have an opinion? Is there something here that I think I have an advantage of over somebody else? Is there value to this bet? In a leg tonight at Mountaineer, for instance, there was 2 legs tonight at Mountaineer in a pick 5 that didn't seem to have a lot of value into it, but there were 2 legs that I didn't feel I could tie up, but I didn't like the favorite in either race. So, those legs, I'm going to get much more speculative, and I'm going to, maybe take an A single with 2 or 3 B backups without the favorite. If I think I got priced along the, at the end of the ticket, maybe I'll throw the favorite in on a backup, but I'll get more where I'm taking a shot in those legs than in a race where I think I have it tied up. And then your ticket starts to form. If you take those two lessons, and I think your handicapping will come in from there. And go back and start thinking. Do I have value? Same old rules. Am I betting too much for what I'm going to get for my return? Am I betting a little to win a lot? Which combinations are going to come out that I'm going to be mad at? I mean, if it runs 3 favorites here in the middle, I don't care if I hit that bet. I'm going to gear away from those combinations. I'm going to try to, get if this 30 to 1 shot I'm throwing in as a flyer hits, I'm going to be mad if I don't hit the pick 5 if he wins. So start with those simple 2 questions about what the race is, and I think the ticket comes from that. If that makes any sense.
And it absolutely makes sense. And I'm going to go to Jeremy wants to fold in on the pick 4, pick 5, but I've got to stress Paul, that you bring up a very important aspect for the novice player and the intermediate player, and that is you have to get to a certain point in your development and in your practice of and in your habit and practice of play, where you understand the threshold that you're looking to achieve. And you said within that in that comment that in essence you don't need to just cash tickets for the sake of cashing tickets. When you're first starting out in the game, it is a confidence builder to bet and to turn the ticket in and win a little bit off of it and get into a confidence building aura that that your opinion can yield a result. And there's a certain value in that. But then when you reach a next plateau and the several plateaus, it's not to your benefit to bet $72 in a multi-race sequence and win 102. You're trying to win 450, 650. You're trying to win a multiple of your investment. And so if it comes up 4 straight favorites and you break even, that's not what you're doing this for. And so I think that element that you voiced there, maybe unintentionally, but that is something that will help players go from one plateau to the next.
No, I think it's back to one of my original rules. Bet a little to win a lot. Now, that doesn't mean you're just playing long shots. I have a friend who has gotten to be. He thinks since the 50-cent denominations have come in that there's a lot of value in the favorite combinations in a pick 4. But the way he plays it, he's not playing 50, 80 combinations to get it. He's playing $40 pick 4s, and the days that he's right, he's not doing it every day, but the days that he thinks it's going to be favorites, he's not shying away from playing it. So it's all to your opinion. You still want to follow your opinion of what you believe, but you don't want to stray from. Even though he's playing the shorter combinations, he's still winning a lot, and he's not betting a lot to win. It's still that concept where that's not usually my strategy, but I'll throw back those numbers, and I think everybody should if you think on most tickets, on most opinions, because most pick 4s and most pick 5s are hard, and it's a rarity that you are going to have those situations. But he's kind of singling in on those days where he thinks it's it's opinion, and that very well may be a winning play as well. So it's not just about having long shots. There's value anywhere. It's like I said earlier, you can find value in 6 to 5s. I mean, you can find value in different odds. That's a mistake that another mistake that maybe a learning player makes is that the definition of value doesn't necessarily mean just longer prices. I listened to the people in Australia and Hong Kong. The price horses are called value, and that's wrong. That's not the case. I mean, there may be a horse. There's lots of horses that are 30 to 1 that are no value. So you got to have an understanding of that. And I think once you get that understanding, then you can become a serious player, a winning player. And it doesn't matter really what your bankrolls are. You have to follow those kind of rules. I mean, there are some advantages of having a big bankroll. And like I said, the pick 5 I think is one of them. And another one is that when you like a horse, the infinite amount that you can play more than, it stretches. In the old days, if I was playing, on my A level $10, my B level $20, my C level would still be 100. And I think that was a big jump for me to say, bet 10 times your normal amount in a race that you like. But the great thing about if you're going to bet more money, and if you start winning and you're able to bet more money, you can bet 100 times that. As long as you're not overbetting the pools, that's a huge advantage you have of being able to bet more. But I think betting more becomes from winning more too. I mean, there's very few guys that just come out, bet a lot of money, and win right from the start. I think that's almost like unheard of. I don't think that's it's a progression, and you win more, and then it's that feel. There's another camp that I don't like where they talk about feel is not a part of handicapping, and I just think that's so wrong. Feel is a part of your opinion. Opinion and feel go hand in hand, and I think that's a mistake where a lot of these math guys, and I am a math guy, by the way, but a lot of them make that mistake of, they just get so rigid and, thinking, that it's got to be this way, I got to do it this way every single time, and I got to bet 4-to-1 shots, or I got to bet 6-to-1 shots, or I got to bet, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. Doesn't matter what I do. Those are losing strategies because every race is different. Every race is a great puzzle. That's the fun of it. And they vary. They vary tremendously. So, being able to adapt to those pools and those races within the legs, is something that you have to have, I think, in order to. And I call it feel, and maybe somebody else calls it something else, but I think it's extremely important. You can't be underestimated.
Paul, before we wrap up, Paul Matties, our guest, and obviously we could go in so many different areas. Got to pull up shortly, but let me ask you for some early Derby thoughts.
I hadn't looked at all, but I suspected that you might be that you might ask. So I actually was handicapping the race today, and the first thing that's really noticeable to me is that the lack of speed. Just with these modern day jockeys, none of them. They all rate anyway, and with a couple of these blow-ups in the Derby, I don't suspect this pace is going to be very fast, which I think Pletcher probably holds the key to it if he
right,
if he
Stanford.
Gets, Stanford and materiality. How much he wants to go after Baffert is going to be probably the whole key to the race, and I don't have anything. Which I think is good about this Derby is I like it better that I think that the contenders are really good. They run really high figures. They are real good horses. Maybe a few of them are suspect at 1.25 miles, but it's not one of these Derbies where all 20 horses can win. It's a more manageable Derby. I think there's lots of throwouts, and I'm not sold completely on American Pharoah, which to me makes the race a little bit interesting. He's been impressive, and he's probably going to get off pretty easy, but he hasn't been challenged, and on my pace figures, what I call my line figures, he has not shown. I believe he's fast enough to run with those other horses, but materiality and Upstart and a couple of the horses in California, Firing Line and the Dortmund, they're faster on what they've run so far, and I guess that's probably the interesting part of the puzzle is how American Pharoah handles going faster. How he reacts to it, and even though it won't be a fast pace, I think it'll be faster than what he's faced. So that's pretty hard. It's it's hard to decipher. The horse from New York is being overlooked, and I don't think he should be. He's in the mix too. For us, it has a chance as well.
Well, I don't disagree, and I completely agree, as do our mutual friend Andy Serling thinks that American Pharoah is in for a little bit of a surprise in terms of having to cruise at a higher speed for a longer period of time, which may be his undoing. So Andy wanted me to send regards.
Yeah, I had a couple of jokes to talk about Andy, when I was talking about the old tools of racing, Little Andy hasn't changed his handicapping in 40 years. He's still doing the same thing. When we run around the Meadowlands, he's got the same opinions. He's just running around on TV instead of around the Meadowlands. So,
I love it. Paul, thanks so much for this. We'll have you on again, and I got to get you on in the morning as well. Paul Matties, the first person I thought of